All right, I'm going to give just a few seconds for the attendees to populate. And are we recording?
Yes.
Oh, it doesn't do the announcement anymore. Okay, so I'm calling to order our special meeting of Tuesday, December 28th. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Student board member Dana.
Here.
Student board member Lyra.
Here.
Trustee Boyd.
Here.
Trustee Davidson.
Yes, here.
Trustee Doss.
Here.
Vice President Durone.
Here.
President Hinckley.
Here.
Superintendent Wells.
Here.
Thank you.
And thank you. And can we have our mission and vision statement and meeting norms read, please, by our student board members?
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Our meeting norms are as follows. Maintain a focus on what is best for our students, ensure a safe environment for all views to be expressed, treating each other, staff, and the public respectfully, endeavor to find common solutions to issues through collaboration without sacrificing one's beliefs in what is best for students, and make a commitment to effective deliberation, each one listening with an open mind while others are allowed to express their own points of view, even if one disagrees.
Great, thank you. So we need to, so actually one quick announcement before we do the agenda approval. Julie, if you can just show folks the website isn't working quite the way it normally does for viewing attachments to the agenda. So if you would like to see the presentation that was uploaded just a bit ago about item 4A, instead of, if you click on view item details, you get an error message, but if you click just on the title itself of the item, it'll open up this little gray box that she's showing and you can download the presentation, which we will also be showing during this meeting, but just in case anyone wants to look at it for themselves on their own computer. I don't know if that explanation makes sense, but it got me to the document. So, all right, so we need a motion to approve our agenda, but I wanted to make a comment in asking for that motion, which is that as posted, the agenda has a review and action item without what I believe is an adequate description of any action that we could take. So I would like to move that we modify the agenda to make item 4 a review and discussion item for us to discuss the contents of the presentation that's going to be given to us by staff. And if I can get a second for that motion, or if other board members want to comment on the agenda as it was structured.
I'll second that.
Before we say, I'm so sorry, but before you second it, is there a reason why it was made a review and action item? And if so, can we hear that reason why before making a change?
I can share with you my rationale behind it, but I'm in agreement with the recommendation to make some adjustments because of the lack of clarity. But the rationale for making it a action item was to give the board the most flexibility in terms of them being able to make a decision if it needed to or felt the need to do so. But given the lack of clarity in advance, I'm in support of having it a review and discussion, and the impact remain the same.
So before we do the second, I don't know if I agree with making the change, because I feel like that will cause one or two things. One, we won't be able to actually, if we do come to a conclusion this afternoon, we won't be able to actually move forward, or we'll have to have an additional meeting, and then that'll be a review and action, which I think will slow things up because schools are slated to be open pretty soon. I don't know if there's going to be time for an additional meeting. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, let me give it clear. I think I wasn't very clear. Trustee Doss. In addition to that, the rationale behind the action item was to provide the most flexibility. But given what our presentation tonight, we don't really need any action to move forward. It's more informational and to hear from the board their thoughts about our plan to move forward. I just
Vice
wanted to
President Duran?
I sort of wanted to follow up on what Trustee Doss is talking about or the questions he's raising. I was honestly very concerned with the whole way that this agenda rolled out. And we have over 150 parents here, at least 170 parents here on this Zoom meeting. And I would like to apologize to the parents that are present with us, and maybe to those who couldn't make our meeting. And the reason I want to apologize is because I feel there was on the agenda that was posted, lack of information, lack of clarity, and lack of transparency. This is not the way I thought we did our work here in Albany. Transparency is always one of the prime things that the superintendent in particular addresses every time, every meeting. And this was an egregious example, I feel, of lack of transparency for us as board members, because I was confused, and certainly for our parents who in my mind became very anxious. And I'm speaking with respect to the emails, the numerous emails that we got. And there's no reason to have created this situation for our community. I think if we had been transparent, if we had posted an agenda that had a clear description of what we were trying to attempt, which was to address the safety of our kids and our staff as we go back. I mean, we need to do that, but the way it was rolled out was, to me, inexcusable. And so I do want to apologize to the parents that are with us and for those that also said they couldn't make the meeting. And I'm hoping that this will be the last time that we will make the mistake I felt that was made, and that we will just not let this happen again. Thank you.
So I feel the same way, which is why I would like to ensure that we do not additionally put the board in jeopardy of violating the Brown Act by voting on an item that has not been described to us, to the public, and I appreciate that. I believe the intent of this meeting was actually just to discuss safety measures, but the way the agenda was posted did set off a lot of alarm bells for people. And I'd like to make sure that we can focus on having the discussion we want to have, which means I, as one board member, would like to take off the table the potential of voting on an item that has not been described to the public, not been adequately noticed, not been described in the agenda materials. You know, I think we can do a lot of discussion about how this happened to this point, but I think our priority today needs to be discussing the safety protocols that we're going to use going forward. And we do need to approve an agenda in order to move into that discussion. So again, I made a motion to modify the agenda to make item 4A a review and discussion item to reflect the intent of the Brown Act and the intent of this board to be transparent and not make decisions that haven't been put forward before the public adequately. And then we can move forward with the discussion.
I was attempting to second the motion earlier. If now's the time to do so, I would like to do that.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Student trustee Dana,
Yes.
student trustee Lyra,
Yes.
trustee Davidson,
Yes.
trustee Doss,
Yes.
vice president Throne,
Yes.
president Hinckley,
Yes,
trustee Boyd.
Yes.
Thank you.
great. So now I will hand it over to Superintendent Wells to, I think you wanted to say a little bit more about the intent of this meeting and then move into the presentation.
Yes, we can do that simultaneously. The presentation PowerPoint will be brought up momentarily. Before we get started, I think it's important to note that there's so many moving parts behind the scene that's going on. Executive Director Alexia Ritchie and I just left minutes ago an urgent meeting with the County Office of Education and the superintendent there and all the superintendents throughout Alameda County. And so many things are moving so fast that we have to be proactive and ahead of it to keep our community safe. And sometimes you don't always have the perfect step, but you have to have the right steps. And I think Albany Unified School District has the right steps. And so, and Executive Director Ritchie is going to talk about in the presentation later about some of those issues that we address today that will impact our community. The good news and what I applaud my staff and the community for is one, you had two options. Sit back and do nothing. That would have been safe, right? Because you don't have missteps if you don't step. Imagine that. But those who step, every now and then you might have a misstep. But there's a bigger picture before us, and that is how do we keep all of our kids and families safe in a secure environment where we can provide the top quality education that our district is known for. And so we want to make sure that we have an opportunity. Given the Brown Act, the board don't have an opportunity to meet to discuss the weigh in on some of these moving parts that happen and change overnight. For example, CDC just yesterday, as you all heard by now, changed the requirement from needing to quarantine from 10 days to 5. The state and the county has made a commitment to align some immediate future guidelines to be in sync with that. But I want to make one thing clear, that we are excited about having our schools open up on Monday morning. Our schools are going to be open Monday morning, and barring any governor's action not to do so, we're going to have school as we know it. But we're also going to have some options for our parents that they can consider as we all have to do things to keep engaging in practices that would keep everyone safe during this COVID surge. And so I want to be crystal clear about that. I also want to say that I am so fortunate to work in a community where we have the kind of activism and support with our parents and who wants to know as much as we want to know. And sometimes we just don't know fast enough. And so I'm happy that instead of us sitting back and doing nothing and playing it safe and jeopardizing the community, that we take this proactive stance that we take in today. So I have no reservations and no apologies about doing what we think is right deep down in our heart and soul. So I want to be crystal clear about that. So I'm going to get into the presentation starting now. Next slide. It's always about the purpose. Why are you doing what you're doing? And let me take a moment to walk you through the purpose. To remain proactive about responses to COVID-19 issues, including current and anticipated Omicron surges, and make all aware of options along with possible next steps in order to keep our schools open. Further, we want to review and remind all about engaging in practices that can keep our families, staff, and students safe. Additionally, this is an opportunity for our Board of Education to provide input, additional direction if needed, and approve our current response to an anticipated COVID-19 surge. This way, we are communicating and being transparent and inclusive, and all are moving forward together. This is not easy work, and it's not for the light heart and faint, but it's work that's necessary to keep our schools open and our classrooms open and our community thriving in a safe environment. Next slide. Executive Director Alexia Ritchie.
Thank you, Superintendent Wells. Thank you all for joining us today. I'd like to outline some of the plans we have to not only maintain, but to increase our testing capacity within our district. So as Superintendent Wells just said, we just got off a call with Alameda County, and we will be moving forward with their plan to distribute rapid tests for families to be taken at home. I'll clarify families because these tests are very specific to students in our district. We do not have enough to distribute to families at this time. We do anticipate, though, getting enough to distribute to every K through 12 student in our district to be taken home. We are scheduled to receive a delivery of rapid tests. However, that date has changed. Alameda County anticipates getting them Thursday of this week and being able to turn around and distribute them to districts within Alameda County by Thursday or Friday of this week. So when we have our quantities, we will be able to provide in our communication to families, as we mentioned, by Wednesday, when we will be able to and where we will be distributing those take-home tests. Again, those are going to be enough to distribute to every student in our district K through 12. We also would like to remind everybody about our options to provide the PCR testing, so the more in-depth testing. Remember, our PCR testing is done in conjunction with a partnership lab. That lab happens to be in Southern California. So our PCR tests are taken, packaged up, shipped overnight, and those results can come back anywhere between 2 and 3 days later. Again, we're in the holiday season, so there might be a lag time in terms of PCR testing that's school-based. In that Wednesday communication, we'll send you a link. You can sign up for a testing account. Basically what happens is it's almost like going to a pharmacy where they direct bill your insurance company. That link has you sign up and provide information for your insurance company to be billed directly. Our PCR testing, again, is available at each school site. We're just going to be increasing the capacity to provide these PCR tests, which are individually results based. You get those, I get those. In addition to that, we'd like to remind everybody that we continue to pool test. We certainly do appreciate everybody who's participating. We have about 2,000 students that we pool test each week. About a year or so ago, when we started pool testing, there was a recommendation to not test vaccinated students. Many reasons behind that. One, limited personnel, limited test supplies, the idea that you didn't need to test if you were vaccinated. However, things have changed. And so we do encourage everybody to participate in pool testing. As you know, there are breakthrough cases, and so you can be vaccinated, you can be unvaccinated, you can still contract COVID, and you can still expose others to COVID. So we do encourage and we invite everybody to consent for pool testing. Again, all of those links are on our website. Our response, there are many recommendations, for example, for families who have been recently traveling. There's quarantine recommendations from the CDC. If families are participating in that recommended quarantine period, then we are offering a traditional independent study for up to 2 weeks, and that does satisfy the quarantine period, again, for travel recommendations. The independent study consists of instructional materials such as packets that are provided by the classroom teachers, At the secondary level, then of course, there's a lot of online options for that independent study. Students will not be considered absent while they're on this traditional independent study, for example, if they're quarantined or if they're in isolation. Again, all of these are excused absences. Next slide, please. Dr. Wells, I believe you're starting here. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Executive Director Ritchie. So again, back to what circumstances would cause a class or a school closure? As we mentioned before, governor's order. The other would be health officials' order, or if we were to have an outbreak among students. Well, those are the two. And Executive Director Director Ritchie, if you could take number 3 and expound, that would be much appreciated.
Certainly. Just to remind everybody, whenever there's a positive student or a positive staff reporting that they have tested positive on a rapid or a PCR test, we receive that information. And what we do is we notify Alameda County. We notify them of a couple of details. For example, when was the last date of exposure? Where was this exposure? For example, if it happened to be in one classroom or 3 different classrooms. And what they're doing is they're paying very close attention to the frequency, and they're paying very close attention to the likelihood that those cases were biologically linked. If Alameda County determines that we have 3 or more biologically linked cases, that could indicate then an in-school transmission or what might be classified as an outbreak. But again, we don't make that determination on our own. We are in collaboration with Alameda County Office of Education and the Public Health Department for every single case that's in Albany, and they in turn advise us for school closures or classroom closures or more intense close contact tracing. But to date, we have not had an outbreak in Albany Unified School District.
And we have not had an outbreak in part because of the proactive engagement practices that families have been encouraging students to engage in along with staff. Number 4, significant number of staff quarantined due to COVID-19 without sufficient substitute coverage. And this would have to be an extreme case where you have about, and I'm exaggerating here, 35% of the staff out, meaning that you couldn't run an operation. And so that's a super, super hypothetical. And then number 5, we don't know what we don't know. And I think that's the biggest frustration being in this COVID era. It's full of frustration. One thing I try to encourage people is not point the finger, because that becomes very divisive, but to work together and try to figure it out moving forward together. And that would be in the best interest of our community and more importantly, our kid. It's important to note that we remain ready, hopeful, and resolute in our efforts to keep schools open, classrooms ready, and schools safe. Next slide.
I think I can start here, Dr. Wells, and I know Dr. Shin, you might be able to help me fill in some of the gaps here, but this would be, I believe, in the scenario of a classroom closure, or let's say a school closure in the event of an outbreak. What we have then is our traditional independent study that goes from anywhere from 5 days up to I think it's 20 school days, if I'm not mistaken. 2 weeks perhaps is the max, but of course we can certainly look at any sort of flex points if needed with our traditional independent study. But what we've also experienced as a district is a full remote or virtual instruction. That then would really go back to the idea that the instruction would be asynchronous and synchronous. There'd be instructional minutes that are required. Again, very different from the traditional independent study, which is just that, independent, the students working on their activities at home with very minimal instructional support from a classroom teacher, for example. Very different than would be the remote or the virtual instruction, which again also encompasses that asynchronous and synchronous minutes. And Dr. Shin, I'm not quite sure if you wanted to add anything there.
Can we pause momentarily? I'm getting a few notes here requesting that we monitor the waiting room. We have a few people in there waiting to join us. Just an FYI.
I'm not sure who has access to the waiting room. I don't see one.
Oh, thank you for that. I must have, that might be an old text, so thank you.
Dr. Shin, anything to add in terms of instruction during classroom closure?
No, I think you captured it all. Thank you so much, Executive Director Ritchie. Just to reiterate that if we have to pivot to remote or virtual instruction, we would utilize the same type of instruction that we did during the last year of remote instruction. We would fall back on the same number of minutes and the same style of delivery as before.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay. So when our team was getting together, we started to think about, well, what next steps need to occur immediately and long term. So this is part of that first process here of communicating to families and staff about the increased testing and those options. The other one is the access to our daily current COVID-19 rates. We want to make sure you understand that as soon as we finish our investigation with any positive cases, then I go ahead and I update our COVID dashboard with our Albany specific information. We will continue to work with the county health departments around any potential issues, similarly to what we did this morning with our rapid test distribution. Keeping the community and families and staff informed on any potential issues, and above all, remaining encouraged and resolute in our efforts to keep everyone safe, and may I add, all of our schools and programs open. Next
Final slide. This brings us to our Q&A.
Great, thank you so much. It's great to hear that we have some of this additional response happening. I can start with a few just clarifying questions. For the rapid tests that we're getting, you mentioned that they would be for students. What steps are we taking to expand testing for staff before Monday and then starting on Monday? Are we able to get those tests delivered to staff as well, or have them pick them up?
These rapid tests are not available for staff members. The county was very clear that the rapid tests that are being distributed this week are very specific to students. We do have options for staff PCR testing and staff rapid testing, and they should be contacting their school site liaison if they are requesting that test.
Have we considered, or have you considered proactively offering all staff rapid testing and the same protocol that we're asking students? For example, the dates that we emailed students before the break about ideally when you would test to be clear for Monday, or do we not have enough supplies to do that?
We do have enough supplies to cover staff testing. Again, if it's requested by a school-based testing protocol, for example, and if tests are being given, let's say, within their own medical community, if they go to Kaiser or Walgreens or anything like that, then we appreciate that and we can reimburse staff members for those. But we routinely test about 250 or so staff members. Some are under the mandate and some are requested by our own staff members. And we will certainly put it out that that would be available for staff members starting on Monday. And if they would like to test earlier, for example, if they think they're in a higher risk group, then they should reach out to their school site liaison and we can start to coordinate that process.
Okay, thank you. I guess one of the reasons I'm asking is I know when Berkeley sent home their rapid antigen tests before break, they sent them home with students and staff and asked staff to do the same testing protocol just to do that screening before. So I don't know if that's something that other people would be interested in us considering.
Let me add there, President Hinckley, about Berkeley. Berkeley, I think, is one of the 3 cities in our country that have their own health department. And so they get access to things that we don't. They're in a very unique situation. As you know, the country is very scarce with these tests that we have now. So there is are not many out there. We're in a really good position, but Berkeley is often in a significantly unique, better position because they have their own health official there, along with getting things directly and more accessible and easier than the many other cities in the country. I just want to put that out there.
Great. Thank you. I guess I understood that we do have the rapid tests enough to do that, but we're not taking that approach. But if the issue is that we don't have enough, maybe we could get some clarity on that later in this discussion. So I guess the other question I had is, for independent study, is there a minimum number of days that students would need to sign up for that? For example, if students returned from travel on Sunday and wanted to take 3 or 4 days to do a testing regimen, could they sign up for independent study for just those few days, or at least have their absences excused, or does it have to be longer than that?
I think the minimum number of days for what we're calling a traditional independent study is 5. So we do need, and that would actually satisfy any quarantine period, for example, for a week's worth of work. And so the minimum number of days really for a traditional independent study is 5.
Okay. And then when is the pool testing going to restart, or what other kind of testing are we able to start on Monday? So if we're encouraging families to do the rapid testing before they send their students to school on Monday, when will the pool PCR testing restart, and how quickly can we sort of communicate out and encourage all families to sign up? Because as it is now, our website still says vaccinated students should not be tested. So when will that sort of pooled testing be able to ramp up? Can we start doing that on Monday, or what would that look like the first week of school?
On Monday, we would actually start PCR testing. The pool testing will start on Tuesday if we follow the same cadence. Then every elementary school will be tested by the end of Wednesday, and we would have all schools pool tested by the end of Thursday.
Great, thank you. I still don't see any other hands, but so one other question that I know has come up is whether we want to consider some of our higher risk activities making any modifications, such as band, choir, indoor sports. I don't know if you've considered additional expanding any measures for that, or we just continue the routine testing for those programs, or if the county had any advice about some of those higher risk activities.
As far as I know, and I'm checking the websites regularly, and we just got off our call with Alameda County, for example, and there has been no additional recommendations or requirements for those activities in particular. I think that we have protocols in place which we need to maintain, and then again encourage folks to participate in the pool testing or in the PCR testing. But right now, there are no increased requirements or recommendations given for those particular activities. We certainly would like to follow the Public Health Department guidance as closely as possible. And again, there has been no additional requirements or recommendations offered at this time.
Great, thanks. And now I do see Trustee Doss's hand.
Yeah, I guess I was had some questions around kind of, it seems like there's a lot of, what's the best way that, it seems like there's a lot of maybe, there's not like any like kind of concrete things. It seems like there's a lot of, well, you can do this, and if you would like to do this, and this would be okay, and that makes me a little nervous, only because I think it's going to be really difficult to have like a more like a concrete plan where people really feel like, okay, safe and right, because as it stands right now, I could show up on Monday. I don't have to have a test. It's suggested, and it would be nice, and people would really like for me to do so. But I don't really have to do it. So is there, so I'm just wondering, like, is there a way that we can kind of have like more concrete things? Like we have these 422 tests, and all staff members are going to take these tests before they come to work. And these 3,483 tests are going to be for all the students, and every student has to take it before they come to school. Like, is there a way for it to just be more concrete instead of kind of all over the place, where some people can go to Kaiser and then we'll reimburse, and some people can go to CVS, and some people can go to Walgreens? It just seems like that is really complicated, and there's a lot of opportunity for things to kind of fall through the cracks. So I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can kind of make things more concrete.
Could we get a response to?
I was waiting for, but let me just say this. Can we make it more concrete, Trustee Dawes? I'm thinking you mean like, can we require, more specifically, let me try to put it in my understanding, checking for my own understanding. Can we move forward and require everybody to do this, where it's black and white and not so wide open with the gray, and with the trusting that everybody's going to do it, and knowing that there might be some who slip through the crack? Can we close that crack by mandating that everybody get tested, for example, with us on the first day of school, and that kind of thing? The way folks are doing it throughout the county and the state, and how we can do it here, we have some limitations where there's some things that we can't mandate and some things that we can. And that's why it's important to remind people and encourage people to be proactive about doing what is best and engaging in those ideal practices. One of the things we're going to do, and we're going to make the announcement, I think, tomorrow afternoon in our communication to all of our families, is that folks will be able to pick up their kits at a specific location here at AUSD, and we'll be asking them to test, maybe that Sunday before the Monday. And if there's any kids who test positive, of course, they remain at home and quarantine, and hence go to our independent COVID protocols with independent studies. And so that we are helping to make sure and support the families and trying to keep all kids safe by doing and wrapping up the biggest thing, the testing, and having families take in an active role doing that.
Do you have another question, Trustee Doss, or a follow-up?
Yeah, so I guess, excuse me, I guess my follow-up question would be, how do we go about simplifying the process? Because again, right now, it's kind of complicated and all over the place in terms of like getting people tested, getting staff tested. And so, she doesn't really want me to talk to you all right now. And so I'm just wondering, is there like a way to, I still don't feel like there's like just kind of a concrete, this is what needs to be done in order to, you know what I mean? Like it still just kind of seems all over the place. I don't mean for like, I don't know. I want to simplify it for everybody. I want to make it as easy as possible on families. I don't want families to have to like for it to be more difficult. I just want to simplify it for everybody, you know, to make it where it's not like complicated, or it's not like, and right now it seems like unless you're like a super involved parent and you go to every meeting and you read every email, you're not going to know what to do on Monday when it's time to bring your kid back to school. For the super involved parents that come to all the meetings and like email us all the time and stuff, they're going to know exactly what to do to a certain extent, but we haven't really like laid out clear guideline, like bring your negative test, email it to this thing, and then you'll be on the list on Monday for your student to come to school. Or, you know, or, you know, we're kind of just, I just want to simplify it. And because right now, I mean, I'm on the board and I don't know exactly where am I supposed to get the test? Who's supposed to test? Like, are we changing kind of so I'm just hoping that we can simplify it and then make it more accessible for parents. For example, if you do test and the test comes back positive, do we have something in place where we're gonna send an additional kit to that family so that they can test again, so that they'll be negative before they come back to school? I just wanna make it easy on families because it's already getting hard enough.
Well, with that part, the last part you described is black and white in terms of having to be tested prior to coming back after quarantine. But I do want to say this, Trustee Dawes, I think one of the reasons you're grappling with feeling like it's too gray and not black and white enough is because it is too gray and not black and white enough. And so we're trying to fill those biggest holes we can. And we need everybody's support in this. We need our parents to do the right thing. We need our community, we need our staff, and it's going to take all of us, given the parameters that we have before us.
May I respond also with a little bit of clarity in my opinion, Trustee Dawes? There's two things that can really make it clear, I think, for parents and families to follow. The first one is you're staying home if you have any symptoms. You're staying home if you've had any exposure to anybody in your community around COVID. That's very clear. And it's actually very surprising to know that some folks are still coming to school with symptoms, both staff and students, and that some don't understand that being exposed to COVID can also present a danger to others. The second one, which is very clear to me, is participating in the surveillance testing, which is the pool testing. Again, I test about 2,000 students every single week. It's working very efficiently, for example, to get those test results back, to identify who's positive, even those that are asymptomatic. If I can get that up to 3,000 or even 3,500 students, again, that's a very simple way to make sure that you are screened for COVID and that we are able to respond once we get those results. So those two things, staying home when you're symptomatic and participating in pool testing, to me, is one of the easiest ways to really prevent that exposure risk.
Thank you. I appreciate Dr. Wells and Executive Director Richie for your comments. I appreciate it. And those are all the questions I have at the moment.
Vice President Duran.
I actually wanted to follow up with what Trustee Dawes had spoken about. I have a couple questions for Executive Director Richie and a couple for the superintendent. Ms. Richie, would you be able to talk and remind us about Albany results, where we are with the community about testing? What's the percentage of our community that has been tested? What percentage of our students at the high school, middle school have been tested? And as you're getting more information about the 5-year-olds through 11-year-olds, what's the latest statistics or data that you can give the board so we kind of know where our community stands just in terms of the vaccination status? Can we start with that?
Okay, I'll try to respond in order, Vice President Duran, but please remind me if I've missed anything. So the percentage of students, for example, that we're testing each week, again, that's about 2,000 students out of 3,500. So I'm gonna say roughly that's 60 to 70% of our population, which are tested regularly with pool testing. We also test regularly about 250 staff members. Again, some of those are under a testing mandate. That's only 6, actually, 6 out of 400 staff members who are mandated to test. And then there are a number of staff members who just participate in our PCR testing each week. So that's about 200 or so, 250. So that's roughly 50 or 60% of our staff members participate. Again, this is weekly testing. This is weekly surveillance testing. We are continuing to monitor our response rates for our vaccination status for 5 to 11. We're also very encouraged in terms of our numbers coming in so far. They're running about 80 to 90% of those vaccinated are responding, which is great. And so we're hoping that we get, of course, 100% compliance with that request to submit your vaccination status when it becomes available. In the meantime, we're looking at about 20 students, 20 students district-wide who have requested weekly testing because they are not vaccinated. And so we are running, again, about 80 to 90% of our population right now are fully vaccinated.
Now was that the students that have provided the information, the parents, as opposed to what percentage of our older families have not responded yet when it's due, the information is due January 3rd?
We need about 10% of our population in that in that 12 and up range to still respond. And then we also need, again, we're in the process, the 5 to 11s, there's a different deadline. And so I think right now we've received responses, and Marina, maybe you can help me with that. I haven't seen the very latest numbers. The most recent numbers I saw, we did get responses from about 60 to 70% of our 5 to 11s. And again, we've gotten responses from about 90% of our 12 and ups. Of that 90%, then is still, we're in that range. We're about 90% vaccinated with that range. So we still need a few more, about 10% of our 12 and ups, and maybe about 30% of our 11 and below to respond.
Okay, thanks for that. The second question I have for you, Ms. Ritchie, is about Monday. The whole point of this meeting today is for us to really have all our eggs together. Is that the word? Hopefully come Monday morning. And I'm wondering, can we be more aggressive? Can we be more bold about what we're trying to do? And I think Trustee Doss suggested that already. What else can we do to be able to start our testing on Monday? Is there a way we can do it so that I know you have staff that supports you to do the testing? Are there other people that can come help us for the actual testing so that by Tuesday, for example, we've done all our schools, pre-K through 12th grade for the testing? Can you picture us having the capacity to do that?
I'm not quite sure if you're asking for the rapid antigen tests or if you're asking for the more definitive PCR tests. We do not have the inventory to rapid test every single one of our students, which is why this county program, which allows families to take it home, and to go back to Trustee Doss's question, there is an option, and we will have that option available for families to voluntarily let us know what their rapid test results are. As a school site, though, I do not have enough inventory to give a student a rapid test. I do have enough inventory to give them a PCR test or a pooled test And again, that cadence was by the end of Wednesday, we would have pool tested every single one of our elementary schools. As you know, the turnaround time to get those results is about 2 or 3 days, and we're in the holiday, so we don't know what that lag time is going to be. But by the end of the week, we will have a real clear picture in terms of who has tested positive with school-based testing. One of the things that my public health group reminded me, though, was remember, even if I test on Monday morning, I still might have someone who's exposed at home or in the community, and they could test negative on Monday and positive on Thursday. So again, kind of going back to what Trustee Doss was asking, and to reiterate what the best cadence of monitoring exposure risks are, it would be if you're symptomatic, you're staying home. If there was an exposure risk, you're staying home, and then you're participating in our pool testing every week.
Yes, I was actually referring to the PCR testing. And if, testing is a concern of ours, why can't we roll it out as quickly as possible, beginning 8 o'clock on Monday morning? And I'll ask the superintendent that question too. So let me just ask the superintendent a couple of things in terms of our being aggressive. Have you had any communication, for example, with ATA, with its leadership, and working with them so that teachers are, have a sense that, yes, they need to be tested ASAP as well to protect themselves, and as well as being able to provide the teaching that we want to do come Monday morning in our schools. So have you reached out to ATA and had any communication with them so they can encourage the teachers to do the testing first thing on Monday morning or Sunday night? And we all realize that testing is not the end all. That's not the solution for our prevention of it, but it certainly gives us a head up on where we are. So that's the first question I wanted to ask the superintendent. And my second question is really, given the testing, et cetera, what is your expected outcomes that you want to see come Monday morning? What is it that you want to be sure that the district is doing ABC as aggressively as possible so that we can prevent more outbreaks, and given that we know about the Omicron being so aggressive, what are we going to do?
I think there's a few questions here in the commentary, and that is, one, I want to remind you about the presentation where we talked about we will be sending out communication and giving families test kits so that they can test on hopefully Sunday, which will give us initial start of the week of testing. It's in the spirit of being inclusive, collaborative, and transparent. And we need folks to participate and continue to engage in these ideal practices so that we can keep everyone safe. And generally speaking, folks have been really committed to that. In terms of being inclusive and collaborative, we always reach out to our partners. And yes, we did reach out to ATA, and we always do proactively and regularly, and even as recently over the break as yesterday, because it's important to do that kind of work together and not independently. So the answer to that is a yes, yes, and a yes. And so as I see us being proactive and not being safe in terms of doing nothing and watch and wait, this meeting is a reflection of being proactive so that we can have these wonderful conversations, grapple with some issues that we might have missed or need to tighten up, and have everyone have an opportunity to weigh in, even our public and our parents who are here tonight. And so, yes, we've been proactive. Yes, we reached out to our labor partners. And yet, yes, we're ramping up the testing, again, starting with Sunday, families taking that test at home to make sure before they send any kid to school that they send them to school with a negative test.
Trustee Lira.
My question was like sort of looking to the future and what the school environments might be like on Monday. So I noticed now that we're like getting into this conversation around testing, and yeah, I think it seems like we're planning on having students return fully in person on Monday. I have a couple other questions like formulating in my head that I might get to, but this one just has to do with like the fact that I know that a lot of students are in support of returning in person. They want that to happen. But with that being said, they're also concerned about safety measures. And I'm wondering, do we have any plans to increase them? Students are concerned about the areas in our schools that are already crowded and also about mask enforcement. And I'm wondering, like, if we plan on having students return in person, like just beyond testing, like how are we making our schools a safer environment so that these students feel more comfortable?
Trustee Leary, you bring up some really good questions, and we certainly would want to work with our site principals, for example, on the enforcement and the education. I know that the students themselves have had some wonderful ideas, and I've been at the high school and been able to monitor what they're doing to kind of to kind of self-regulate, you know, what they're doing and what their student peers are doing. But I know that I'd like to certainly hear of any specific incidents, let's say, of not having mask compliance regulated, or areas of the school building, let's say, that need a little more attention. But right now, all of the protocols that are in place certainly just need to be reinforced. We need to work with our student body, our community, again, on the, if you're having symptoms, you know, you're staying home, you're wearing your mask, you're making sure that you're compliant with all of the regulations that have already been put into place. When we get, let's say, additional information from a public health department, or if there's a public health order, which, you know, allows us to pivot back, let's say, to cohorts or things like that, then we certainly would. But right now, there are no increased and there are no additional recommendations when it comes to the health and safety and COVID protocols, but we do need to maintain and reinforce what we have in place right now at all of our school sites.
I'm really glad to hear that, and I totally agree. I think the messaging just in general needs to be a bit stronger as we're returning in person, as to just like what enforcements there are. And I guess, yeah, I think from my own experience at the high school, a lot of it has to do with lunch lines. And I know that like we've had meetings in the past about this, and we've been given updates about how lines are being like regulated. However, students are still concerned about those. At least at the high school, I'm a little less sure of like what's happening at our other sites, which is something that Allison and I can look more into. And then I had another thought right now about just surveys. I know we had, I forget the name of it, but we had a survey that students were taking before coming on campus when we had the like hybrid plan. Is there I think it could be effective if we brought that survey back by Monday, so that students could take that survey and see whether or not they should take a rapid test, and whether or not they should be at school if they are experiencing any of the symptoms that the survey lists. I think that could be a helpful way of knowing like exactly how students are feeling, and the tangible way of students giving information to the district on like how they themselves are feeling.
Are you referring to the sort of app thing where you checked fever, runny nose, that thing?
I don't remember what it's called, but I think it was like a
Okay.
website that you would go to. Yeah. Could we bring that back?
To do symptom checking, just as a reminder for people before they come to school.
That would be a big lift to bring it back as early as Monday. And just to remind you that actually the survey did indicate that if you're fully vaccinated, then you are clear to come to school unless you are showing symptoms. And so really, and I'll reiterate this and I'll repeat it and repeat it, the number one checklist in your own head for families and for students is if you're symptomatic, if you've been exposed, then you're staying home and you're contacting somebody to get on that independent study. I do have to tell you that when we had that screener 19 in place, again, trying to monitor 3,500 students every morning and then pulling those that hadn't completed it was a big burden on instructional time, that's for sure. And so again, it's that self-monitoring piece, which we transferred over to in terms of if you're feeling those symptoms. If you've been exposed, then you're staying at home. But the number one criteria was actually if you're vaccinated, you're clear to come to school as long as you're not showing any symptoms. And so that hasn't changed either. And again, with our numbers quite high, again, about 90% of our families and our students then are cleared to come to school by the simple fact that they're vaccinated and they're not showing any symptoms. And that's especially true for our high school.
Mhm. Well, thank you for clarifying that. I think just what I'm looking for is just some way of ensuring that every student somehow gets tracked for what their status is with COVID. And I think, yeah, I agree with what you were saying earlier, the fact that you can still have COVID and pass it on to people regardless of being vaccinated or not. That's what I'm looking for, and coming up with a solution or something to address that, as I think, yeah, what we're talking about today. So thank you for answering my questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the best suggestion, my response is participate in our pool testing then. I think that's one of the best ways that you can monitor yourself for COVID. And again, the other piece of that is make sure you tell us what your vaccination status is.
I just wanted to ask a clarifying question before we move to Trustee Dana, because the current guidance is vaccinated students continue to come to school even if they have been exposed to COVID through a close contact. And so I wasn't sure if you were saying, and our email to families was actually a little confusing because it said students should not return to school if they've been exposed to COVID, but actually, even if they've been exposed, if they're vaccinated, the guidance says they return to school. So I just wanted to clarify, the only situation in which a vaccinated student would not come to school is if they were experiencing symptoms or if they themselves had tested positive. Is that still the case?
So it's certainly still the case, but again, if you have had exposure to COVID, you certainly would like to get tested. That would be a recommendation. It certainly isn't a requirement, but any close exposure to COVID, we would hope then that you are testing yourself before coming to a school program or even a community event so that you understand what your exposure risk is to others. But no, we do tell folks that if you're fully vaccinated and you've been exposed to COVID, you are clear to come to school as long as you are not symptomatic. If you're symptomatic, we need you to get tested before you're coming to school. Anybody who's symptomatic, we need you to get tested before you're coming to school, regardless of your vaccination status or not.
Great, thank you for clarifying. And I understand that we want all of our students to rapid test before Monday, no matter what, whether they're vaccinated, unvaccinated, exposed, etc. Our hope is that we can universally test everyone before they come back. All right, Trustee Dana.
Yeah, so I share a lot of similar opinions and questions with Trustee Lyra, so I won't reiterate them now. But I did have one more piece to add, and I think this came up while Trustee Doss was speaking. This is about like communication to parents. I know a lot of that information isn't being sent to students currently, and I'd really like if it was, so that, I mean, like information about like pool testing and that sort of stuff. And I think it's important that we have that communication, because if students know like what is out there, like what they're eligible to have, like what the whole process is, I think it'll be a lot smoother sailing, especially because they are a part of the family and they're the ones that are getting the test in like the long run. So that was just a point I wanted to bring up. However, I do pretty much agree with everything that Trustee Lyra has already brought up as well.
Before we go on too far, Trustee Dana, I want to thank you for that input and feedback. That kind of summarizes the purpose of having this inclusive collaborative process, because often students when we send to the family, we assume we're sending it to the students too, but I guess we're really not. And so it was good to hear that. So thank you so much for making that great point. Both student trustees, I really appreciate it. And I just wanted to give you that feedback. One, because your input is so valuable, both our student trustees, and when you guys make these wonderful points, sometimes we kind of stand dumbfounded and you wonder, are they listening? Not only are we listening, we're making adjustments based on what you guys said, and I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wells. I really appreciate it.
Trustee Bid.
I think that was Boyd. Thank you. I appreciate all the questions and comments, and I appreciate Executive Director Ritchie and Dr. Wells giving that presentation and all the work that has gone into it and into preparation during a time when we were supposed to be getting a little bit of a break. So thank you everyone for that. In general, not to be like alarmist, but I think everything that I'm thinking about and looking at comes from a place of, and I don't know numbers, I just know anecdotally, but the frequency with which people who are vaccinated are turning up to have the new variant, and also the frequency with which people who have no symptoms whatsoever are turning out to have the variant. And so every, like what I say comes with that viewpoint. I feel like it's important to, it doesn't seem like the county has really made a shift as far as the weight. I mean, by all means, put weight on vaccinations. We're fully vaxxed, we're boosted, we're doing everything that people will throw at us. But just the idea that if you're vaccinated, then you don't need to do certain things. Like, I just want us to be mindful of the number of breakthrough infections that are happening, and the fact that we may need to make some sort of a shift, I think personally, as to how much weight we're putting on, well, if you're vaccinated, then you don't need to do these things, because being vaccinated, unfortunately, just doesn't guarantee that you're not, carrying the disease around. So with that in mind, I wanted to ask a few things. One of them is about quality of masks. I know that some of our community members, especially who are in the medical profession, have been asking about, have been talking about the importance, and I've seen articles about it, of having the right kind of masks, not just kind of the fabric masks, especially with this variant in particular, and the way that it is transmitted more easily. And I'm wondering if there's been any discussion about the district getting access to a higher quality mask to distribute to families who, perhaps don't know about the different levels of masks, don't have the ability to get them. So yeah, I'd love to know if that's been something that's discussed, or something that we could perhaps look into. It's the first question.
And the short answer to that is yes. And we have the discussions about the quality of masks. We are in a process, and we'll be doing it again, if not late tonight, tomorrow morning, counting what we can have more available. When we met with our partners just yesterday, our union leadership, they requested that, hey, we would like to have maybe better quality masks available for staff and students and the kids who may need it. And so, yes, we've been having that kind of conversation. And yes, we think we can supply that before Monday. Great, thank you.
Also, I think we've talked about this, and I know that there's a communication coming out, I believe, tomorrow. So I think this is already maybe going to happen, but I just wanted to make sure that, or say that I think it's important that the messaging around pool tests be really clear and deliberate, that it's something that's recommended and strongly requested for everyone, and not just those who are unvaccinated, because that is somewhat of a change in messaging, I think, based on changes in the different variants and based, on what we know now. But so I just wanted to kind of say that clearly, and hope that that messaging will be clear, that all families are being encouraged to have their students sign up for pool testing, and also appreciating the comment from Trustee Dana that students get those communications themselves, so that students in their communications be encouraged to sign up for pool testing regardless of vaccination. And then I also just wanted to express support for something that was discussed before, about the idea of, even though it's not what's being requested by the county, delaying, especially for this first week, where even like all things as good as possible, we're not going to have results from tests until like later in the week. It seems like hopefully people are rapid testing on Sunday, and so know it before Monday. But things like, band, choir, any like PE that's happening indoors, if those things could be moved outdoors, or I mean, I wouldn't want to take away the activity as, in part a parent who's got a kid in choir who really enjoys it. So I'm not trying to remove that enjoyment from students' lives, but if they could be outside or something along those lines, I do think it's important, regardless of what the county is recommending right now, to be really mindful of limiting those high risk behaviors to the extent we can, especially during this first week where our information is going to be, kind of spotty at best in the first couple days there. And then the last thing was just, I feel like it's been kind of talked around, but I want to just kind of suggest and like speak it into the world, like what would be required in order for us to mandate pool testing from staff and students. And I think I know that since this is a review and discussion, it's not something that we could be acting on today anyway, but I would like to just kind of speak the words. And then also if anyone could say if they know if that's something that is being considered or discussed in other districts, I would just like it to be something that we are at least having a conversation about. Thank you.
Trustee Boyd, let me try to answer the last question about the mandates for food testing. And with all the other superintendents and county superintendents, we've grappled with that in terms of the parameters of what we can and can't do. Some of us would like to just go do it, but there's some legal ramifications, and hence come the frustration. Why can't we just have everybody food test and not come to school? We have laws that we don't like, but we have to adhere to. And it gets difficult, and that's when it gets really, really frustrated when you don't have, for example, sometimes we don't feel like we have the governor who have our back because these things can happen before we put ourselves out there and find ourselves in legal trouble, or the health officials come and do this a little too late. And we would like them to use the legislators to get this kind of work done, because as superintendent, it limits us from doing what we know is best for kids and community, i.e. requiring. And so we can't, because what we think is right and safe, we have to do it within the parameters of the legal scope, if you will. And so, yes, we've had lots of conversations about this, even as recently as this morning, about how do we do this? Can we even raise the issue about, can we have it where parents have to give us notification to exempt their kids and we just test everybody? Well, no, you can't even do that. And so we've been grappling, and let's face it, we have reached precedented frustration during the COVID era in every walk of life, ranging from our school board, superintendent, to cabinet, to everyone, because a couple of things. One, just not being in the know and feeling like you don't have any influence like you like to have it. But what made it so great is that we have been inclusive and collaborative and trying to grapple together, as Trustee Vice President Duran had mentioned. Superintendent Wells, are you reaching out to ATA, the teacher? Oh yeah, we don't move without reaching out and doing this together and moving together, and even misstepping together or not. But the thing that we do it together. So yes, we've been grappling with almost everything that you can think of related to COVID as a priority. My staff is on vacation. I called them for my vacation. Why? Because the health and welfare of our kids is more important. And sometimes you have to make these tough calls to do what's best and right. And so I wanted to share that with you. And thank you for the question.
Thank you. Trustee Davidson.
So all of my other questions have been answered, so I really appreciate this board because I feel like we have covered so many important topics. I just wanted to say, now that we have pretty much come to the understanding that we cannot mandate testing before kids come back or while kids are there, but we can encourage volunteering into it. And we can really send out another invitation to families that even if your kids are vaccinated, to please put them into the pooled testing or put them back into the pooled testing. I also wanted to say that I think we could maybe add some signage in the next couple of days at our school sites. I know that a lot of our families are visiting our school sites right now for outdoor time or walking by them. And then we could let them know, hey, please do this, get your tests, because many of those are the families that aren't on these meetings and aren't on other communications. So if we could work on getting some signage out there, that'd be great. If you guys need any help, let me know. I would happily volunteer, and I'm sure others in the community would as well. But I think now the job, it sounds like, is just to get the word out to everybody to get into pool testing and do this testing that we're sending home before we send our kids back to school. The only other things that were brought up to me were just a couple concerns out there that we continue to limit, if there's kids in interventions or anything crossing over. And then I did have some people ask about the screener coming back, but I hear the realities of that now.
Could you say the last bit about the intervention piece? It got
Oh yeah,
a little garbled, at least for me.
Just that, kids who are mixing over in interventions and in other specials classes, that maybe we, for the first week or two, really pay special attention to that so that we're limiting those in case we do have a case somewhere.
Great, thanks. Trustee Doss.
Before we go to Trustee Doss, can I get clarification, because I want to take this input and make some adjustments. I heard both Trustee Boyd and Trustee Davidson mention to significantly reduce the high-risk practices. To sum it up, is that accurate? I.e. ban, choir, have that outside, and the mixing of cohort, try to reduce that, i.e. on the case of pull-out intervention for the first week or two to significantly reduce. Okay, good, I got it. Thank you for that.
Trustee Doss.
Yeah, I was just hoping to get a little more clarification around the inability to mandate pool testing and negative test results before resuming school.
Trustee Doss, for clarification, the first one was you wanted to know about the inability to require pool testing or mandate it?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't have the attorneys with us today, as you know, but there's legal parameters and consequences for making every kid take a pool test, and if they don't, exclude them from in-person school would be problematic.
Could you answer that question also for as regards to staff? What kind of testing mandates, whether those would be more feasible for staff than for students? Either as Trustee Doss asked, either for regular PCR testing or for the rapid testing before Monday.
Director Alexis Ritchie, did you want to take that one?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is it feasible? I think Trustee Boyd and Trustee Doss have both mentioned, what's the feasibility of mandating testing specifically for staff? I think we've gotten the answer for students, but is it feasible for staff? Either PCR testing after we open or to mandate. It sounds like we're not even at this point planning to actively promote them doing rapid testing before Monday, but I'm just trying to pull together a few questions about what can we require of staff in terms of testing, or is that also legally not feasible?
Oh, I might have to ask my human resources officer to weigh in on that one, but I do know that our current mandates are only for unvaccinated staff members. And so perhaps Ms. Gonzalez can speak to other options for mandating testing for all staff.
And that was an example of the governor eventually getting in front and signing that order to make that a legal requirement. Please go ahead.
Right. So the governor made it a legal requirement that folks are either vaccinated or test. And so right now, all of our employees are in compliance with that mandate. So we have 6 folks who are not vaccinated and they are complying with the testing order. If the board wanted to, pass a policy that mandates that, that is more restrictive than what the law allows, and mandate that all staff be vaccinated or all staff be tested prior to a certain date. The board could do that, but you would have to include in whatever it is that you take action on, which I know today you're not taking action on anything, but let's say you decided to have another meeting and took action. You would have to include what the, what word am I looking for? I don't want to be too negative here, but what the consequence is for non-compliance with that, right? So, and non-compliance, meaning if we are preventing employees from returning to work, what kind of effect does that have on that employee, assuming that it would be adverse somehow. So you certainly could decide to do that, but you know, it can't just be one part, it's going to be multiple parts. And then following that, we would have to bargain the effects of that decision with our labor partners.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that got answered. Trustee Doss, do you have a follow-up or additional questions?
Yeah, I had a follow-up, kind of like additional, so I'm thinking about this scenario, and I'm saying this because we're having a discussion, and I'm hoping everybody can kind of help me work through it. So I'm not saying it in a way to like be like to attack anybody or anything like that. I want to make sure I say that first. So the way that we currently kind of have everything in place and the way the rules are set up currently, we could have an unvaccinated student who traveled outside of California to a really crowded place where there was a lot of COVID cases. They could come back, not have any symptoms, be feeling just fine, be unvaccinated, come to school, not have a negative test to start school, not be signed up for pool testing, and go throughout their whole day and could potentially have COVID and be exposing everybody on the site that day. And we would have no way of knowing based on all the rules and regulations and things that we have set up in place right now. That student could also be in the band or in like, you know, other things, but they could literally come to school without breaking any rules and expose a lot of people because they don't have to have a negative test to come to school on Monday. They don't have to sign up for the pool testing because the lawyer said that we can't do that. And so for me, that feels, how can we work through that? How can we?
Let me say this, Trustee Doss, I really, really appreciate your question. One, because it's a real question, and we had a few of those cases. And I want to share with you how we responded to it. You have the law, and then you have a practice. Sometimes the law and practice is not congruent. I had a couple of occasions where we were made aware of that very same scenario. And I had to weigh what the current law precludes you from doing, or the ethics of doing what you believe is right. And we cited on the ethics, and I made the call, and I don't advertise it, saying, no, the kid can't come back to school. I contacted the family and said, absolutely not. Now, by the time they sue us, maybe a year and a half down the road, I feel good and sleep at night because I said no to that kid. And that's a lawsuit I would welcome. So you do have, and we're having real talk and we're being honest and full disclosure here, those kind of scenarios. I had another case where family just came back, I think it was from Europe, and wanted to bring their kids into school the next day. And we were talking about it, and then they volunteered to quarantine their kids for X number of days, 10 days. Because my position was, I'm not in favor of that, and I'm not going to allow. So you have your law and you have your practices. Sometimes they're not congruent, and sometimes you have the ethics that's in violation of the law. And so, yeah, I took that. In leadership, you have to make a call. And I thought what would be best for kids in the community was to keep that kid at home out of an abundance of caution and let the lawsuit come when it comes. That was my call. Didn't advertise it, but we were very proactive in a few of those kinds of cases. Now, the right thing to say to stay out of trouble and to be congruent with the law as it's changes sometime overnight is, well, we can't do anything because, you know, and then, you know, you have, okay, what would be, as you grapple with my team, what would be the right thing to do? What's the ethical sound thing to do? How to keep everybody healthy and safe? And so we had to make that call. I made the call. And that's real, and it happens. And I can tell you, come Monday, we're going to have that issue as well at a few schools. And so what is your superintendent going to do? Well, I'm going to be consistent with my past practice and side on what's best for kids and our community in terms of health and safety.
I'm sorry, can you just clarify that you're saying that in the scenario that Trustee Doss outlined, that you would tell a family their child can't come to school even though they aren't violating any of our district policies?
I would offer the family, let me try to put it differently. I would offer the family all the other kind of options and counsel with them to keep all kids and families safe. And hoping that they would go with my recommendation, and I would position myself that I am vehemently opposed to them coming to school and putting other kids and families and staff at risk.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. I think it is important that we are proactive in telling families what we think is best, but we also just stated that we can't legally prevent students from attending school if they're not violating a district policy. So just given that this is a public and recorded meeting, I want to be very clear about that.
So in order for that to not have to be clarified, and in order for us to not put people in uncomfortable positions, I'm hoping that we could have a district policy that's more concrete so that we don't have to be so individualized, so that we don't have to tell that one family, hey, can you please do this, or can you please do this, because this is, this health and safety. The one-on-one basis, I feel like can cause issues and problems, and I think it's unfair to put on one person or to put on a district staff or to put on, I think that that's unfair. And I think that it will add on to your already overflowed workload. So I don't think that's fair. I think as a board, we need to come together and make this more concrete and make these rules safer, because they're not as safe as they can be right now. I literally just outlined, for lack of better words, a loophole that puts everybody in danger. And we can't close it, as our president just stated, because that would be violating the rights that this student has based on the policies that we currently have in place. So we need to fix that, because right now, for lack of better words, it's broken, safety-wise. So how can we do that before one person comes and gives everybody this very transmittable and highly contagious Omicron variant?
I'm assuming you're talking about some hypotheticals, because we don't know if they're carrying that, but you're saying because they traveled and stuff, they can be carrying it. And the way the law is right now, we can't preclude them from coming to school. We only have right now the recommendations. And the
way that our specific policy is set up, we can't prevent that student from coming to school, because we didn't do what Berkeley did, which was send everybody home with a test and say, take this test before you come back to school, which makes it to where this person wouldn't come to school because they would take that test, realize that they had it, and they would stay home, right? So we don't have that in place, so we can't do that.
Oh, yes, we do. We do.
Yeah, but we're saying it's optional.
It's also optional in Berkeley. They're not able to require a negative test for students to come.
Just saying, I feel like we have to close that. Somewhere we have to. I can't be the only person that feels this way. Like, so I could just not take that test at home, and then I could not sign up for pool testing, and then I could be wearing the cloth mask instead of the N95 mask and be putting everybody at risk. Because we don't mandate the certain type of mask. We don't mandate the pool testing. We don't have a real mandate for the vaccines, and we don't mandate that you have to have a negative test to come back to school. I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm just saying that currently the way this is in place, it's not as safe as it can be. And we have the capability to make it safer instead of waiting for an outbreak and then going, oh, I don't want to be the board that goes, oh, we could have did this or we could have did that. I just want to fix it before it happens so that it never happens.
So I think we all share the frustration with the limitations that the state law puts on our ability to prevent students from coming to school if we think they're a risk. We've asked for some clarification about what the state law does or does not allow us to do. I think sounds like it would be helpful to get a more specific write-up of what legal options there are for mandating testing for both students and staff, just so that the board is fully informed about what that could include. We do know that San Diego's vaccine mandate was thrown out by a court, so it seems unlikely that there's a lot of room to tighten up a vaccine mandate at this point for students. But again, we can keep getting legal advice from our attorneys about the state of what the state law will permit us to do in terms of criteria by which we could tell a family that their student cannot come to school. But I want to take one last board question, and then we do have several members of the public that have been waiting. I want to make sure we get that comment in, and then just make sure we're all have summarized what kind of communication is going to be going out and what kind of resources will be going out in the next couple of days. So we'll end board discussion with you, Vice President Duran, at least before we go to the public.
Well, one thing I wanted to mention that we do in fact have a mandate in place. We have a vaccination mandate in place, and it's rolling out even as we speak. January 3rd is our the first impact of our mandate that the board did. So it's not as if the board has not done anything. And I think we're being very careful, as President Hinckley said, we do have to follow the law. And so I think reminding all of us that our community is fairly safe doesn't prevent the contagious disease from not happening in our community. But I think we all realize that we have a community that has made a great attempt at making everyone safe. The other thing that I wanted to do is just at the end of this whole thing, President Hinckley, I wanted to see if we could get a summary from the superintendent as to exactly what the results of this meeting are. At the end of this meeting, where are we at? And what are the next steps that are going to be happening, so that we're all clear and transparent to our community. So if you could just be sure that that happens at the end of this meeting, I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great, will do. So we have 25 minutes left in our meeting. We have a growing number of folks seeking to comment. So we're going to do 1 minute public comments, and we will start when I get a timer.
All right, one moment, I'm just changing the time on the timer. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Starting with Linda.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing to keep us safe when we return to school on Monday. I just wanted to get some clarification and to point out that to my knowledge, the traditional independent study that we've had in place for years wouldn't fit a scenario of a family coming back from a vacation or visiting a place that has a high rate of infection, maybe not as tough mask mandates. And if they feel that they want to keep their student at home, that this would not qualify for an independent study in the traditional sense, just because that type of independent study requires 10 school days advanced notification to the office at the school. Also, we do have some robust means in place, more robust in the past, to keep students who are absent abreast of what's going on through Google Classroom, other means, but it would not, to my knowledge, qualify as an independent study in the traditional sense. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to take all the comments and then make sure we bring any outstanding questions back to staff, if that's okay. and then we can condense it a little more. So I'll make note of any questions that come up. Next is Andrea.
Hey,
Yes,
everyone.
Andrea.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for having this meeting today. My focus is on older students, given that my kids are in 9th and 11th. And my focus is also on keeping the schools as safe as possible so we can keep them open physically and protect our community. And I'd really like to see us actively protect our students right now by being very specific. I've heard a lot of how we can't be specific and we can't be black and white. So I have some suggestions for you. When I see that Puerto Rico just had a concert outdoors, vaccinated, mask requirements, and over 2,000 cases tracked to it, when I hear secondhand that an Oakland choir saying vaxxed and masked and vaxxed, and 100% of the choir has it now, I'm concerned. Specifics: indoor band, indoor choir, hallways, mask usage that's high level with compliance enforcement and messaging, indoor PE, lunch policies, and congregating in the front of AHS inside before being released for lunch. Please act. You have that power. Our hallways cannot be made safe with Omicron. You must mandate high quality masks. The floor should not be our ceiling. We need multiple mitigation focus. And I really would love for you to ask our students more questions. I think they did a poll. They might have some experiences and some data they could share with you. So I'd really love to hear you all engage with them more today. Thanks.
Thank you. Next is Marin.
Hi, I'm Marin's father. She and her family are out of the country, and I don't know what to tell them because they're not coming back until late on Sunday night. So I don't know if I'm able to pick up the test kits for them. If they can't get the kids, they have 3 children, and if the kids can't be tested by Monday morning, do they go ahead and go to school? So I know you're going to answer the questions at the end, but that's, I'd just like to know what to tell them when they get back. Thank you.
Thank you. Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. I really appreciate this thoughtful effort to protect our students against Omicron. So I want to share the concern that was just mentioned that many families, including my own, will be traveling back on the weekend. And so I'm not sure how we are going to get our rapid test. Also, I am in a place that has 5 times the rate of COVID as the Bay Area. I'm really concerned. I just feel like it's almost inevitable that my daughter has been exposed. So I would probably like to have her in quarantine next week with multiple tests. And I think this kind of messaging to people who have traveled a lot to really encourage quarantine with multiple tests and independent study during the first week would be really important. And then finally, I really want to encourage that we have all students and staff in N95 masks going forward so that we can keep down the spread of Omicron and keep our community safe. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you.
All right,
Nicole.
my comment.
Hi, thank you everybody for meeting and thank you for your hard work. I know this is last minute information that everybody's getting exposed to. Just as the governor only recently announced that millions of tests would be available to California students. I just wanted to provide a little information for clarity because there were some questions that were brought up earlier, rightly so. There was a program offered by CDPH before the break that offered testing, take-home testing for students and staff. That is different than what the governor has offered and what we're talking about now. This current offering is only for students. And so the question about staffing getting tests is relevant, but not part of the current offering through the governor's current California student focus.
Great, thank you. Miles, oops.
Hi, my name is Miles Levito. I'm currently in 11th grade. Please excuse any drowsiness. I received a booster yesterday and I'm a bit out of it today. but I'd like to speak, if I may, about some concerns I have. I think that, with all due respect, I think that a lot of discussion that has been put forth today seems to be some different reality than I'm currently observing with my eyes. This idea of, oh, well, the county says it's okay, we'll just fall back on just trusting that vaccines are going to make you immortal. Obviously, I think as Trustee Boyd brought up, I really concur with her opinion. That it's a good idea to be vaccinated, obviously. That's a logical step. That's not going to make you immortal, and that I think that we're focusing too much on how close we can get our hands to a fire and not how far away we can get from it, for lack of a better term. I think that to some extent we're really riding on, oh, we hope this will happen, we hope people will listen to us, and that's just not realistic, and I don't understand what that thought process is really coming from, and I don't understand why any criticism of that or any concern about that is shot down or avoided. And I'm a bit frustrated about that. And also, to another extent, I think that we're focusing a lot on students, which is obviously important. It should be top priority. I think that we are also unfairly endangering staff, who are in many ways more vulnerable than students, I think, at least, particularly considering that staff are, not in the prime of their lives. They're middle-aged, if not older. So that has its own complications. And then the fact that we're not prioritizing them for rapid testing, and particularly like custodial staff who have to spend their days cleaning, I think that puts them at extended risk, and I don't understand why we seem to be glossing over that as well. I think that I'm rambling on a bit too much, so I would appreciate everybody for listening and for being so patient. Thank you once again. Sorry.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, having Zoom issues. All right, go ahead, Sarah. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for the meeting today. I really appreciate all of you and your time and effort. So I'm not just talking for myself and my son, also some of my Tibetan friends would like for me to, after the meeting, update them. So I'm not, if we have some kind of a summary, that would be great. I know President said afterwards, the board will be emailing us, but I'm not quite sure about the independent study, the instruction. Will there be instruction by the instructors, or it's just like a traditional independent study? And also masking, double masking. I don't know if you are mandating that or not. And what about the booster shots? My son got, and some of our Tibetan friends got booster shots. So where are they fall? Thank you.
Thank you. Mariam.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi. So many things. What can I say in a minute? Thank you so much. I know this is your guys' break, and you guys needed this break, and now it's, intruding. The stress is intruding. Just a few things. Masking, as a physician, masks is our #1 protection when we're working. So I'm so thrilled to hear that you guys are looking into higher quality masks. Older kids can do the N95 mask that seals, and younger kids, there's this flow mask. I got one for my daughter to try out, and she actually likes it. It kind of seals to the face with soft silicone, and she can breathe well. Highly recommend the flow mask. Highly recommend that we do something about masking that will make the environment safer, that we change filters on our air purifiers. I don't know how long those filters are, how often they need to be changed out. The rapid antigen test. Oh, that was fast. Okay.
People can also feel free to continue to email the board with suggestions and comments. All right, next is Payal.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate that you're having this meeting and conversation. This is important work. And I really appreciate all the questions that the board has been asking. I think we're at this moment where the first couple of weeks back are going to be incredibly important. Everyone has different metrics of safety. So that clarity in communications that Trustee Dawes was talking about it is really so critical. And we don't want the COVID dashboard lighting up just like the week after we reopen and sort of raising alarm, reducing confidence. And we know that public health recommendations are lagging. So being proactive about safety is key. And I want to echo the questions that Trustee Dawes and Boyd have asked, and also the comments related to the need for better masks. All masks are not created equal, and it's a really strong tool in our toolbox. So we're at the PTA, we're looking at how to make KN94 masks available to all kids. I also want to reiterate the points related to band and choir, keeping them outdoors, keeping meals outdoors, and in the communications that we share out, keeping those really straightforward and simple, because even the notifications we've gotten regarding positive cases
I'm afraid we have to move to the next comment.
Translations,
Thank you.
please, in all languages. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next is Kim. Oops, we lost Kim. Yolanda. You might be muted, Yolanda.
Sorry, I was walked away from my phone because of Kim. First of all, I just want to thank everyone as usual for taking time out of what was probably supposed to be vacation or work days for many of you. I want to really thank Trustee Duran, because I appreciate her apology at the beginning of this meeting. I will say from my perspective, getting a notice about an emergency board meeting with a cryptic line with no details gave me unsettling flashbacks to my children being home for more than a year, and there was nothing that I could do about it. So I would just first like to reiterate that it would be really good if the AUSD administration and board could ensure really crisp and clear communications. I think this was sort of an unnecessary turmoil that was caused, and I know a lot of parents felt it. I'd also just like to say that this conversation is also a little bit too wide-ranging and giving me a difficulty sometimes, and I just encourage us to be a little bit more clear in what we're trying to accomplish in these discussions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Deborah.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, thank you. So one of my concerns, I share a lot of the concerns around the laws and all the restrictions, and it sounds like the only thing that the school can really do, that the board can do, is really strongly encourage people to get tested right now. And I would love to see maybe some tabling Monday morning, with tests available there for people. I love the idea of surveying to know who to offer the rapid testing to, who's been exposed, and just that multiple opportunities for students to be able to test, students and staff. So for the middle school and high school, definitely offering those rapid tests, and just, again, encouraging people. I love the idea of the signage that, someone else suggested, but that strong encouraging needs to be done Monday morning in person for people who cannot receive the information sooner than that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sophia.
Hi, so first off, I just want to say thank you to the board for having this meeting about safety. I think it's really important. I'm an 11th grader at the high school, so my focus is on there. And I'm feeling very concerned because I feel like there's still this mindset that people who are vaccinated are really not going to transmit the virus or are just, much safer. But with Omicron, I really feel like it's different. So with that, I think that testing is really our best option, and obviously you guys agree, but I want it to be made more available or more communicated. because I feel like students are just routinely left out of the conversation like all the time. And I feel like there's this feeling of like, where do I get my test? What do I do? And not really knowing what to do. So having better communication and having more accessibility is really, really key. I'm also concerned about lunch when it's raining. I feel like I don't want to go eat inside. This feeling again that like Omicron is making things more dangerous again. So if we can have better like outdoor areas to eat, having more testing, temperature checks. We used to have that when we had hybrid learning. I just want there to be more vigilance and understanding that even if you're vaccinated, this is kind of making that moot at this point. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Next is C. Petzold.
Hi, thank you very much for the time, and thank you for working so hard on this winter break. I really appreciate it, and all the time that is put in. There's been a lot of really helpful points brought up before me. The importance of improved masks, eating outside, choir, band outside. All these are really great ideas. The idea of having tests available, especially this next coming week, would be a really helpful way of combating a lot of the uncertainty that we have. And I think we all know that right now we are not in the same situation we were a few months ago, and finding ways that we can communicate that to parents, to students, is really key. And so while the mandate option for testing seems to be legally prohibitive, having a way to be creative with its solutions, I think is still something worth researching, and being very clear that encouraging folks to test even if they don't think they need to would be good. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Jocelyn.
Can you hear me?
Yes. There's a bit of an echo.
Thanks for having this meeting. I'm hearing a lot of people talking about how they're traveling internationally, or and they're just coming back on Sunday, and then they're going to test and then they're going to go in. If you've been on, I'm just expressing concern about this idea that I was just on a plane and then I tested and I'm fine and I can go to school tomorrow. Doesn't really follow the science of how one gets COVID and when you're going to test positive, et cetera. And I'm not sure how, as a school board, we can address that, or even like the school system can address that. But I would like people to remember that if you were on a plane yesterday and somebody on there had COVID and they gave it to you, you're not going to test positive tomorrow. And that's one way to help prevent the spread, would be people keeping that in mind. Thanks.
Thank you. Emily.
Hi there. I want to thank everybody for giving up vacation time. I really want to thank the board very, very much for your leadership today. I appreciate it. I'm just curious about the pool testing that I've heard mentioned to all school sites. And to my knowledge, it's not happening at the high school. I think it's been happening broadly at the elementary, and I know for 6th grade at least. And so I'm wondering, is there a plan to ramp up pool testing at the high school amongst vaccinated kids? And is there communication about this? It's possible I'm misunderstanding, but as far as I know, the kids that are getting tested regularly at the high school are just the athletes and the musicians. That's all my comment. I thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Wells. Thank you, Dr. Ritchie. Thank you, or Director Ritchie, sorry. Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. It's not technically night yet. we're hoping not to quite get there. All right, Jocelyn. You might be muted. Or that, actually, I think we already heard that comment. Jeff.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for all your hard work on the time off. I just wanted to bring up something that as a parent is a bit confusing, and that is the ability to hop in and out of a hybrid learning environment or remote learning environment. Previously, my son had been in contact with someone with COVID back in August, and we had kept him home, but the independent study program did not work out particularly for him. And I was just kind of curious why we haven't gone to a system where we have a laptop sitting in front of a teacher who's in a physical class, so everyone has the same sort of teaching and assignments, and it's a lot clearer.
Thank you. Erica.
Hi. My question is for parents like me that have younger sibling at home that's not able to be vaccinated yet. So my concern is sending my older daughter to school and her being exposed to at least the first week or two, going back, bringing anything home for my younger daughter. Are we actually able to elect the instructional learning for the first 2 weeks, even though we didn't travel? And that's just like a precautionary measure for us and maybe other families that have members that cannot be vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent.
We're going to come back to the independent study. We have a few related questions for
great.
that, if that's okay. Next is Olga.
Hi, I also want to thank you all for working during your break, and again, happy holidays to all of you. Thank you so much for doing this. There's a few questions, two actually, that I have, and I hope I can get them in. The first is, will teachers be prepared to send home daily assignments to families for the first 2 weeks of the school year? Si las familias van a tener, si los maestros van a estar preparados para poder mandar tareas a los estudiantes en las primeras 2 semanas. I just translated my question. The other question that was texted to me by families is, when are folks supposed to present, or when is the deadline to be able to present vaccinations to the district? Is there a way, if the parents are not capable of doing it electronically, that they can take it to a physical location? La segunda pregunta que tengo es que si el distrito está preparado en donde uno puede llevar prueba o muestra de sus vacunas para sus estudiantes que están asistiendo a las escuelas. This is really important because families want to be able to know. I have a third question, and I'm spending it translating it just so that we can make sure that families that are listening can understand what's going on right now. My third question, and I apologize, I wasn't in the meeting very early on in the first portion, so there's still confusion whether or not kids are supposed to show up even though they have not been tested before Monday. So la última pregunta que tengo para el distrito es si los estudiantes deben de presentarse a la escuela a pesar de que no hayan tomado un examen o una prueba de COVID para poder mostrar que están sus hijos negativos. My apologies. I just want to make sure that everyone understands, but also the last question was, I'm getting text messages from families. Does this mean their kids should not show up to school next week if they don't have proof of a vaccination or proof of a test? So I just want to clarify that. Again, I was not in the very beginning of the meeting, so I'm just translating questions that I'm being texted. So I appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make sure that gets answered. Next is Erica. I'm not sure if this is the Erica who spoke already or not. All right, I believe our last commenter is Saring. And I'm going to promote you to panelist because of a Zoom issue.
Hello.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I would like to thank the board and school staffs and everybody who are responsible for making the school safe. I have 2 sons, middle school and high school. They are right now safe, and we all are vaccinated. And my hope is, I hope that we don't go back to this situation like last year. So I hope everybody do their, responsible, and so that everybody will be vaccinated and tested regularly and protected all each other against COVID vaccine. So that's my request to everybody. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And this will be our last public comment so that we can wrap up all of the things we've discussed and finish our meeting. So this is Sherry. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just have a question. What is the district policy for returning students and staff who have recovered from COVID? Thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, there were a couple of questions that I want to have staff answer, and then we'll try to wrap everything up. So one was about independent study. If we could just get a sort of full description of how you're going to present to families what their options are if they would like to quarantine for a few days, a week, or some additional period of time. What are the ways that you're planning to communicate to families what their options are? And I think especially to encourage families who have concerns about the safety of other family members or their own potential exposure, what can we say to families about their options as far as independent study, or if it's below a minimum number of days, how would we treat absences if a family wants to come back a few days late? Could you just clarify what that looks like and what we're going to encourage families to do and what we're going to offer to families?
I'm going to ask that our Executive Director, Alexia Ritchie, facilitate the responses, and the rest of staff will chime in. She is our Chief COVID Liaison person, so Executive Director will be answering the question and or facilitating those questions to the rest of the staff.
Great. So to request independent study, especially if it's associated with, let's say, a positive test result, let's say it's associated with the CDC's recommendation for quarantine. We have the system in place for families to contact their school's front office to let them know that they are requesting the COVID-related or the quarantine-related independent study. And the front office staff then communicates this and works with that family and with the teachers to ensure that the work is sent home. Perhaps it's a packet at the secondary level. Again, perhaps it's more electronic, but so that hasn't changed. If you're requesting independent study because of COVID-related issues, or if you're requesting independent study for just a short-term issue, then please contact your school's main office to coordinate and to start that independent study. I know that Assistant Superintendent Shin has worked very hard on our Assembly Bill 130 independent study. But again, this is more of a short-term independent study, again, based on a limited number of days. Please contact your school's front office to request that COVID-related independent study.
So just to clarify for a couple of things that came up, there's not a minimum notice period that families need to give. So they could email their principal Friday and say, we're not coming back next week. Could we have an independent study? Because somebody raised the issue that we used to have a 2-week notice period. And then the second question is, does it have to be, are we limiting the number of people who can take advantage of this option? For example, the scenario one caller mentioned of, I'd like to take a week because I have a younger unvaccinated child and I want to see how the first week goes. So is there that kind of flexibility? Are we going to say, if you want to be cautious for a week, that's a legitimate reason, or does it need to fall within one of those other categories you mentioned of either an isolation situation or a CDC recommended quarantine? Or can it just be, I would like to delay my return for a week to do additional testing because I want to be safe? Is that okay? And is it true that they don't need to provide advance notice.
I was speaking with our Chief Human Resources Officer via text, and it's my understanding that, you know, COVID-related quarantines or COVID-related independent study requests do not fall under that guidance in terms of a 10-day notice period. Again, we have not had to exercise a 10-day notice period for the past year and a half or so, especially if someone was going to be on quarantine. In fact, it was immediate. If we were sending a student home, then that independent study started immediately. I think what she was referring to perhaps is maybe a non-COVID related independent study request, in which case that would, I believe, according to our current internal policies, require, let's say, a 10-day notice up front. But it's my understanding, and it's been our past practice, that if it's COVID related and there's an independent study request, whether it's that one individual or perhaps in your scenario, there's a student or a family member who has some concerns, then we would accommodate them as soon as we could get that work together. The classroom teacher, of course, will need a little bit of time to compile work. They need to know if that student's out for 5 days, 10 days, so forth. But at the same time, our past practice has been to be able to accommodate that immediately.
Okay, great, thank you. And then there was a few questions relating to the rapid testing in terms of, I guess, if you could explain sort of when they can be picked up, and also affirm that we're not able to mandate rapid testing. So students can come to school Monday, even if they have not done the rapid testing for whatever reason. And then also just clarify who this is intended for, particularly if students are flying back from travel or returning from travel over the weekend. How does that, what is our recommendation for those students? Because it sounds like people are a bit confused about how the rapid testing option interacts with when they return from travel, and you know what the sort of sequence of timing is here. So maybe this could be an opportunity to figure out how we're going to message this to folks, and how those pieces fit together.
Wonderful. So we should be getting some more information in terms of when our inventory will actually be in Albany. As we know right now, Alameda County is due to get their inventory of rapid tests on Thursday. It's going to take them some time to turn around and pallet that out. We'll be sending out our crew then to pick up these rapid tests as early as Thursday afternoon, although it could be Friday morning. We understand that we have requested a test for every student in our district. So we are not necessarily making a count of who's traveling, nor would we distribute these only to folks who are traveling. We would have a rapid kit available for every student in our district. I think that it gives some parents and some family members and some students peace of mind in terms of what that might look like on Monday. But one caller was very accurate in terms of your exposure risk. For example, you might test negative on Monday, but your symptoms kick in because you've been traveling, and then you're positive on Wednesday. And so these rapid tests being given out, we certainly will have a mechanism for submitting that data voluntarily. When students come back, we will also almost immediately start up the cadence of pool testing. So for example, a family member could test on Sunday and it's negative. And if they go to Cornell, for example, or if they go to Ocean View, then their student will also be tested within the first 3 days of coming back to school within that pool testing regime. And so there's a couple of things happening. That one kit being sent home more for peace of mind and for reassurances, especially if you have been traveling. But again, our testing cadence will pick up again as early as Monday with PCR and our staff members. And Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we continue on then with pool testing for all students.
Great, thank you. So I think part of the messaging is to emphasize that the fact that we have rapid tests does not allow people to not follow the recommendations for travel quarantining after travel. It's not a sufficient way to ensure that travel was not actually a risky activity for you. All right, I had one more question, but we also have Principal Reimuller here, and then we'll do our wrap up. So go ahead, Principal Reimuller.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. I hope you had a great break, and it continues. But I just wanted to, I've been watching the meeting, of course, and I just wanted to try to give a little bit of clarity around the independent study and whether people should stay home or not. So many of our families planned to travel, and they prepared independent study requests well before the break. They requested and planned for their quarantine, and they have their independent study contracts ready to go. That is, teachers have been working on that, secretaries have been working on that. So that is one thing I really appreciate our families doing ahead of time, because they know that they were traveling and going to be exposed. So then there are people who were not perhaps planning on it, but then discovered that they either tested positive when they get their test, and I appreciate the district giving out the test, that's wonderful. And if they test positive, of course, or if they have any symptoms, of course, they need to stay home. And if they stay home, they will automatically be excused. We're not going to mark anybody unexcused if they say we're quarantined or we tested positive. However, it does take a little time for an independent study packet and contract to be created. So anybody who's quarantined, they're getting work. It's just like they're homesick, right? They're getting work from their teachers, and we provide that for them. But anybody who wants an independent study contract and lets us know on Monday, it won't be ready on Monday. It takes time. The teachers have to prepare, and we have to get ready for it. But of course, you will always be excused, and we prefer you to not come to school if you think you've been exposed or you have a positive test. So you will not get an unexcused absence. You just might have to wait a little bit for work. It will take us time. So I hope that helps a little bit in clarifying the difference between how fast we can create an independent study packet for people. And some teachers will send homework immediately because they already know. They'll say, oh, read this today. And they just send an email, and others will prepare the packet and send it, especially if it's younger kids who are on the computers. So it makes a difference what the age of the child, what the length of the time is. But if you say you're quarantining, or you've been traveling, or you have a positive test, you're not going to get marked absent. You're going to be excused. I should say that. You will be absent, but you will be excused.
Got it. Great. Thank you. That's all very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Principal Reimuller. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you guys. Thank you.
Great. All right. So I'm just going to summarize the list of things that have come up, some of which were already in the presentation, but just as this sort of follow-up and next steps. So one is that we are working on improving access or making access to quality masks. Mask enforcement has come up. And in addition to being able to distribute higher quality non-cloth masking. And I think also this is a messaging piece to our families to make sure that we are also adding to the public health message that cloth masks are not sufficient, particularly with this variant. We have the rapid testing program that we should learn more about in a couple of days in terms of how it's distributed, what the goal is, what the expectations are from families. We are going to do a communication push for vaccinated students to participate in pool testing and increase our push for all students to participate and make sure that that's happening in all of our sites early next week. We are going to ensure that our travel guidance is clear, that we are explaining to families what their options are if they don't want to come, if they can't come back or won't come back the first week for whatever reason. We have several additional suggestions or steps to take for high risk activities. So including indoor PE, indoor band, indoor choir, potentially indoor athletics, some of the hallway line crowding situations, all of those, I think will be good for us to get updates on soon. And communication, there were several suggestions, both about ensuring that we're doing adequate translation for all of these communications. I think I would also add, for some of the most important ones, doing text messages. We have the capacity to text our families. Not everyone is on email or computers this week. I think particularly for deploying the rapid test options, all of this communication, really, if we can leverage whatever contact information we have for families. And then also several suggestions about adding students to all of those communications, and also getting some two-way communication back and forth with students about what their suggestions and concerns are about safety. So the last piece, which I think is still a little unclear to me, is how we're gonna proactively test staff in the same way that we're trying to proactively test students. It wasn't clear to me if we have the sufficient tests outside of this new program, if we already have sufficient antigen tests to do screening of staff before Monday or on Monday, or just, is there a plan to increase testing for staff in addition to students? At this point, I think most of our staff are well over 6 months from their second vaccination. I presume many of them are working to get boosted, but that does seem like a high risk situation, and I'm still unclear about what our next steps are for increasing the testing regimen for staff. So that would be my last question in terms of what's our follow-up on that, and what are our options for getting that rapid tests out to them before Monday, doing rapid test screening Monday morning when they come to the schools, or also encouraging them to all participate in pool testing as well, like we're doing with students.
There's a few questions there, and when it comes to staff and what we are allowed to do legally, we're doing. In addition to that, we will be continuing to meet with our leadership and our unions about how to offer additional testing, ranging from considering a pool testing for staff, or offering a rapid test, what we have for them as well. Executive Director Ritchie, did you have anything more you want to add to that regarding staff, and Human Resource Chief Officer Gonzalez as well, in terms of parameters that we have for staff, our legal parameters? And okay, so that might be good to weigh in here.
Great. Just a couple of reminders to staff that we encourage you to reach out to your school site principal or your identified school site liaison to request any tests. Also want to thank those staff members who are routinely participating in PCR testing. We will start that on Monday morning, as we always do. We finish it by Tuesday, and staff usually gets the results by Thursday. So please reach out to your site principal or your identified school site liaison if you would like to request a rapid test before Monday. And then again, thank you for participating in PCR testing as early as Monday morning.
Trustee Doss.
Yeah, I have a question. We had mentioned earlier about that there were about 10% that hadn't responded. And so with the 10% that haven't responded, and also with the if they're not opting into the pool testing, where do those students fall?
I think in accordance with the Board of Education's directive, those students would be placed on independent study if they did not require the one of two mandates, i.e. providing that vaccination status or being tested. So by the end of the first week, we'll be looking at all of our students that are 12 and older, and there might be some families then that are mandated to pivot to independent study because they have not responded to that request.
Thank you. That was my last question, and just really appreciate everybody kind of taking the time away from, vacation and family and everything to come here this evening and really kind of work through all of these things. So I really appreciate everybody being here this evening. Thank you.
Trustee Boyd.
Thank you. Just following up on the question about staff, and actually I kind of like made a note, President Hinckley, and then you said, and the last thing I need to say, and then it was exactly the thing that I was going to raise my hand and say. But I just wanted to make sure, like, for people who aren't either gobbling up all the information when it becomes available or on multiple sort of family threads where people are like bombarding you with the information, whether you ask for it or not, like, as far as for our staff and teachers, not my question or comment is not about trying to require people to do something different, but just making sure that the way that we're trying to really actively message and encourage and educate people about the importance of being vaccinated, but the fact that that's not like the cure-all in the way that we thought before, and really encouraging people to be getting tested no matter what, no matter whether you have symptoms, not, etc. Just would encourage, and I know that you're in constant communication with ATA, which is wonderful, but would just encourage that message to be just as strong as we're giving it to families and students, that we're making sure that that same message is getting through to all of our staff as well. Thanks.
All right. There was also, I missed one comment, just speaking of vaccination proof coming next week. Somebody, it sounds like some clarity about whether families can bring paper copies of vaccination records in to meet that requirement. I know you all are following up individually with families that you haven't heard from yet, so that may come up as you reach out to them. All right, Superintendent Wells, are there any other items?
Thank you,
You
President.
want to make sure let's not add anything, but
No.
is there any other follow-up we should expect, or what's maybe you could just summarize with the communications families can expect and that the board can expect about next steps on these, and then we'll wrap.
Madam Chair, President Hinckley, thank you for that. We are in the process of communicating in multiple languages now, providing a summary to the families and to the board, and outlining our next steps based on the input. I want to take a moment and pause and thank our parents and our community and our Board of Education for such a wonderful, impactful meeting that I think is going to make a difference. And if nothing else, we know collectively how we're moving forward together. So the meeting accomplished its main objective. For that, I'm appreciative and thankful. But we will be getting communication out hopefully tomorrow evening at the latest. We're working on that. And we will continue as we have communicating to families. We would also take and articulate the adjustments we're going to have in our response to the anticipated surge. I will be issuing a directive to staffs about some do's and don'ts, i.e. the next 2 weeks, ban music, PE outside, those kinds of things, and other areas that were mentioned by both Trustee Davidson and Trustee Boyd and others about making sure we address those high infection rate areas so that we can significantly reduce this surge and keep everybody well. So more to come tomorrow evening. Look for a communique from me, and that's where we are, and we will continue to communicate about anything else. We would also have in that communication when and where to pick up your test kits for your family and your student. And I would be calling out for some volunteers to work with me and my staff and others. I'll be reaching out to the board, so feel free to come out and help pass out the kits if you're available. And so we appreciate what you're doing and the sacrifices you're making, stepping away from your family momentarily to do something so incredibly important and something that we value, and that is providing our kids with a continuous, uninterrupted education. And so that's what I have for tonight, Madam Chair, President Hinckley.
Great, thank you. We look forward to the follow-up, and everyone stay warm and safe and masked up and tested. And we'll take a last word from Trustee Doss and then adjourn.
Oh, I just received some additional information that there are rapid tests available at CVS on Solano, 6 rapid tests per person. So you're welcome to go there if you, and I encourage you to do so if you can. That way your whole family can get tested and everybody kind of knows their status as we kind of jump into school on Monday. So please do that. If you have any additional questions or are curious about where you can go, please email us and we will point you in the right direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, good luck out there, everybody. And our next regular board meeting is January 11th. I don't know if we'll be meeting again before then, but everyone take care, and we'll see you while we're handing out tests or on Monday. That's cool. Bye. Happy New Year.